Hey, what's up, everybody? We have got the latest episode of The Bad Batch, episode 10. It's called Common Ground, and we're going to do it right now.
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
Hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel,
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
and we're your hosts for this show. So, The Bad Batch, episode 10. Let's get right into this. What were your overall thoughts on this thing?
Overall thoughts were really good. I really enjoyed this episode. It didn't really feel like a filler episode, although it kind of was in a way, but
I know.
not.
I know exactly what you're thinking because that's where I was a little bit on the fence too, where as the thing was starting to progress, I'm like, this is kind of feeling like a filler episode to me. But as you pointed out, it
Yeah.
definitely wasn't.
Yeah, definitely. And it's cool because, it revealed some things. It really kind of it has some, some really cool action, but it also kind of had a little of I don't want to, it was kind of a turning point for our heroes in the sense of their feelings on certain people. And so, I thought that was cool. That was a cool element. I never really thought about that, up until now. And then I'm like, all right, well, that was cool that they kind of added that in there. And then, like I said, the other things that were revealed in the show kind of makes me definitely like, okay, I see where this is going now. This is one of those episodes where it's like, okay, now I see over the hill, like, all right, I see where we're going with this now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because Ronaldo, right out of the gate, chats in and says that he really enjoyed this episode. And I think that that's really the way that this episode kind of hits you, is that at first, it's a little bit slower than some of the other episodes, and you start to think, maybe this thing isn't going to be as great. And this is something the Clone Wars always did that always irritated me, is that they would be progressing, with the whole main storyline, and then all of a sudden they would drop in like this 3-episode arc of some filler story or whatever that may have been interesting, but at the same time, you're just like, oh, come on, get back to the regular, real meat of the story. And that's where
Right.
this one started to at first veer off, but then you realize very quickly that no, this isn't the case at all. So, yeah, man.
And I think they learned from that too.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that, again, one of the things that I think the Bad Batch does better than a lot of the other animated series is that even though it's still got a lot of episodes, I mean, it's got 16. The Clone Wars basically had 22 in a season, sometimes 24, but it was usually 22. So the Bad Batch isn't really that far less. I don't remember how many episodes Rebels had per season, though. You remember?
I think Rebels
offhand?
might have been. No, offhand, I don't. Maybe
I don't-
like 12 or 14.
Yeah, I don't really think it was as many as this, but one of the things that I think it does is it's really good at keeping your focus on a lot of what's going on. They don't really veer off of the main plot too much. It seems like that's what they're doing, but in reality, you see very quickly that no, that's not what they're doing at all. And so I find that to be refreshing. So one of the things that they start to do, I mean, this whole thing opens up in a pretty fantastic way, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we definitely get like one of these, grandiose, imperial speeches that are kind of, being, which is amazing to me. They're able to do this stuff without a microphone.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to go into whatever the technology is. But I mean, one of the things, before you get too far into it, just to set the scene a little bit, one of the key things about this is that it's basically set at Raxus, which is a planet that we did visit during the Clone Wars. And in fact, trying to remember the name of the episode, it was A Hero on the Other Side or something along those lines. I don't remember the exact title.
Oh, that's with Mom Bonteri.
Yeah, I mean,
That was Padme's friend.
right.
Was it?
Yep.
Yeah.
That was the one and that's when you
Yeah.
find out that the Separatists really aren't the overall, like, really terrible villains that you think they are, that they have their viewpoint. And it's almost like from their view, the Republic are the ones that are the oppressors. So they're revisiting that whole planet now. and you're starting to see a little bit of the aftermath of that. And as you point out, the whole thing starts out right away. That it's like, okay, you got the senator going up there basically saying, yeah, the Empire's coming and things are going to be better or whatever. And, I mean, you can already tell. And even in this thumbnail that we have right over here, the senator and his little sidekick droid, they're not really buying into this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we kind of start off with this whole imperial speech. She's basically talking about like, yeah, we're here to help, and because of these other insurrections that have been going on, we're going to institute a mandatory curfew, and it's been approved by your own senator, who is located in this picture, Avi Singh, and accompanied by his droid GS8. And so, of course, he's kind of in a moral dilemma, because at one hand, he wants to do what's right for his people, which he believes that the Empire shouldn't be there. But on the other hand, he's trying to, keep everybody, including himself, safe and out of harm and danger as well. So the Monopoly man here kind of has a bit of an issue.
Well, exactly, Uncle Buxley. And I think that one of the things that's really cool about that, though, is that it really does. And once again, one of the things that I totally love about this series is that it really deals with a lot of the deeper issues that you are really facing, or at least the characters are facing in Star Wars. It deals with a lot of the deeper themes that you don't really even think about. And this is a good example of that, where you have, a lot of times you're just thinking in terms of the macro. But when you really stop and think about all this stuff, you pretty much have the senator who's torn, because on one hand, he wants to do what's good for his people, but he's not convinced that the Empire is it. But at the same time, he has no recourse, really, or at least he doesn't feel like he does. I mean, what's he going to do? He can't really rise up with them, against them militarily. And so in a way, he's in between a rock and a hard place. I mean, it's like, well, what do you do? Because on one hand, you don't want to go up there and tell the people, oh, yeah, these guys are great, this is wonderful, knowing full well what you're, going to expose them to.
Signing them up for.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
You're basically lining them up, and that's just got to be a really tough situation to be in. And I thought that they did a really good job at conveying that in just, what is this, like the first 3 minutes of the episode, basically?
Yeah, I mean, and the thing that people have to kind of realize, too, is that, the Separatists at one point were against the Republic, and the Republic, but the Separatists unknowingly were still being controlled by the head of the Republic.
Yeah.
And so now that, so now things have kind of shifted now to the point where now the Republic has essentially transformed itself into the Galactic Empire. And now you have this whole regime now of them, with them pretty much assimilating or, accruing all these different planets under them, so to make their regime even bigger and stronger. So now the Separatists, or they are a former Separatist, country, they really don't have, any, like you said, any recourse to fight back against them. And so then now, we have this dilemma where Avi Singh, he's kind of up there and he's starting to deliver the speech. And then he, his conscience just eventually just overwhelms him to the point as he's looking at the people and says, you know what, I can't do this.
Yeah, I can't do this.
And he just starts basically saying like, no, this is wrong. We should be able to do this. They're trying to do this. And of course, they take him into custody. But before he even made his speech, he delivered a message to his droid GS8 and said, if anything happens to me, make sure that you follow my instructions to the letter. And we later find out what that means, which is essentially GS8 calling in to Sid and basically getting the Bad Batch or to come in and actually rescue him.
And again, I mean, with each passing episode, I'm falling more and more in love with the Sid character, about how central this character really is to the story. But before we get to more of these, Ronaldo's been going a little bit crazy in the chats here, so I want to get to some of these things. He was talking about heroes on both sides. That was the Clone Wars episode that we were talking about. which that
And
episode
by the way,
was
Rebels
amazing.
has 10 episodes.
Rebels has 10 episodes?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Has even less than I thought it did. But here's something that Ronaldo says that I want to get into a little bit too. He says, I love that they use the Separatists. I think it's great to show at least a little bit of the Separatist reaction to the Empire. And that is one of the things that I find really fascinating. You know, Ronaldo goes on to say it's interesting because basically the Separatists lost the war, so they have to submit. But one of the things that I find really interesting about this whole dynamic is the fact that when you last leave the whole story arc of not just the trilogy, the prequel trilogy, but the Clone Wars in its entirety, there's all this complexity that's in there. If you really stop and think about it, because like you said, you had the one guy playing both sides, right? Palpatine basically unknowingly was really the head of the Separatists too. I mean, obviously Grievous, Dooku, all those guys were more or less the face of it, but he was really the puppet master. He's the one that's pulling all the strings. But of course the Separatists don't know that. And so they have these ideological differences from the Republic. They don't want to be assimilated. There's all these downsides that they think are going to happen if they become part of the Republic. And of course that generates this whole war. We get a little bit of a glimpse of that too when you see Cassian Andor, which is why I'm looking forward to the Andor series, because I have a feeling they're going to delve a little bit more into that. Okay, he was a separatist, now he's a rebel. And in this, it's basically the same kind of thing. You have this empire who essentially was the Republic. They just more or less transitioned into the Empire. And it's all this complexity about how would you feel? You know, because on one hand, they're somewhat of a fascist regime. And to me, anyway, that would simply amplify what the Separatists probably already felt about the Republic. You know, they're probably like, see, I told you those guys.
Yep.
They had no idea. And then, of course, in the whole heroes on both sides thing, when you basically had this whole understanding, and Padme was able to convey, like, look, not everybody in the Republic thinks the way that you think they do. All the progress that was made up until that point is basically lost now because of the Empire. And so I think that's great. And now they're having to reach out to, as you say, they reach out to Sid, which, of course, then the Bad Batch has to go. And that's where we start to get into some really, really interesting storytelling here. So,
yeah.
Keep us going, man.
So from that point, so, you know, the Bad Batch had just come, you know, returned back from a mission, and, you know, they're all kind of like jovial and stuff like that. Sid then comes with the, hey, got another job for you guys. You know, here's the situation. There's a senator who's on Raxus, and, you know, he needs to be, you know, extracted. And, of course, you know, Hunter's the first one to, like, you know, like, no, we can't take Omega into, you know, a place that's swarming with Imperials. Like, that's just no. And then, of course, you know, Omega, you know, of course, she's still eager and wants to, you know, do her part, as she's, you know, claims. And, you know, even Tech made it like, well, look, you know, you got two bounty hunters that are after you. You're like, this is not really the time for you. You know, we need to keep a low profile right now.
Yeah,
you know?
I thought it was kind of cool that they did that, because one of the things that I would have thought was unrealistic is the fact that you basically have this character that everybody's after in Omega, right? Logically, you wouldn't want to keep bringing this person on all these missions, because now you have to basically dedicate extra resources to protecting her and making sure nothing happens to her. So I was really happy to see in this episode that somebody was like, you know what? Maybe we should just leave her behind. Maybe we shouldn't take her. If we're going to do the mission, let's go do this mission. We can focus on it. We don't have to worry about anybody taking her. And then it's almost like becomes now more of a prominent mission that we have to deal with her. And that makes perfect sense. And that's not something that you usually see in things like this. Usually they don't
Right.
want to break up the team or they want to add a little bit of that extra drama or whatever. I was really happy to see that finally somebody's like, you know what? Let's just leave the kid at home.
Yeah, basically. And it was funny because you know, like Wrecker's all like, well, because they're all kind of debating about it, and Hunter's like, well, the kid's been through enough. Wrecker's like, she looks fine to me. Like, what are you crying about? And it's once again, it kind of shows you that different styles of protection. Hunter's more the father type guy where he's like, no, let's do what's in the best interest of the kid. Wrecker's more like, look, man, it's us. We're fine. She's fine. This is what she wants to do. Like, he's almost like that big brother type, so you can definitely tell those differences. But then I also do love the comedy between Sid and the Bad Batch because, Tech starts explaining stuff and she was like, look, Goggles, I don't need a history lesson. And then she calls Hunter Bandana. I thought that was priceless when Hunter's all trying to like basically saying like he doesn't trust. She's like, well, Sid said basically, leave Omega here with me. And he's like, well, I really don't trust you either.
Yeah, which that actually kind of surprised me. Although it's a realistic reaction, I have to say that I was a little shocked by that comment.
Which one?
When they basically Hunter? Didn't trust her either, yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean,
granted, it's realistic. Like, when you really stop and think about it, you just start thinking, well, yeah, actually, that makes sense. But you begin to look at them, because Sid has been in pretty much every episode, and she's been giving him the jobs and all this other stuff and providing resources, you almost start to look at Sid as kind of like the den mother of this group.
Basically.
And,
and the thing about Sid is that, because of her line of work, you can, by default, she's kind of like shady, just by her line of work in a way.
Right, but at the same time, the Jedi trusted her, though.
Yeah, but you kind of had to. Like, you kind of had to keep certain people on a leash but I love the way that Sid explained it. She was like, but yeah, look at it this way. If it means keeping her safe means you guys go out and make me more money, it's in my best interest to keep her safe. So
yeah, like, again,
right.
once again,
that logic, I love the logic they use in
exactly. A lot of this stuff makes sense, and that's one of the things that I really appreciate about this show. By the way, Boatwright Family and Comics joins us tonight. So,
hey,
what's up? It's been a little while, and it's not the end of the show. Which, congratulations! You're pretty much right there in the beginning, so it's good to have you back with us. But yeah, I think that one of the things that's really cool about this is that they do think about these smaller things that make sense. They don't just try to make it make sense on a greater level. They actually look at the minutia of each of these things. Once again, like leaving Omega there, or Sid giving a reasonable explanation about why she should be trusted. These are all things that I think is a really nice attention to detail that really draw me into the series even more. I'm already captivated by the storyline, but I have to say that just the way that they handle all the situations and then the characters and then the interaction between the characters, I find it to be less fantastical than what you normally see in these type of animated series. So that's cool.
Yeah, definitely. So of course, they decide, they have to break the news to Omega. Omega's not happy about it. Of course, she's like moping and pouting. So she kind of goes off, and then the team kind of goes off to Raxus. And as they're on their way to Raxus, Echo kind of starts making his whole little plea, saying like, can't believe we're going to Raxus. It's a separatist, planet, and I just don't like it. And Tech is like, yeah, you said that, like, again, like, we're kind of tired of hearing about it, basically. And so you kind of see that Echo really kind of has an issue with it, and it's because of his his training and all this experiences he's had being a part of the actual Republic. And because to the Republic, the Separatists were considered the bad guys. That's who they were enemy. Fighting. They're the enemy. We've been fighting the whole time.
It's no different than here on Earth, where you've been fighting a certain country for a long time, and all of a sudden they're allies, and There's
Yeah,
people
you're
that
right.
they have an issue with that. And I think that that's another thing that I love the fact that they explored a little bit. And again, I don't know about you, but I didn't find them overdoing that,
No,
which was
it did.
really
It wasn't.
refreshing.
Yeah, and then once they land, you know, now they come in encounter with GS8, and they're like, "Wait, our contact's a droid." So it's kind of like it kind of gave me that Mandalorian vibe, you know.
Yeah, actually,
'Cause you know
yes.
how he felt about droids is kind of like, okay, why are we trusting this droid? And this just seems all kind of weird and wonky to me out the gate. But GS8 is trying to explain, okay, the situation. And the Bad Batch, they're all just kind of like, look, we don't care. Just where is he? And they're kind of treating GSA kind of coldly because of their own personal grudge against the separatists. And
Yeah,
I
even
think that
though if
once
you
again, that
look at
keeps
it,
being reaffirmed.
right. But I mean, if you look at it, and this is what's really interesting to me about it, is that everybody, even though they all kind of have this sort of negative feeling towards the separatists, there's actually varying degrees between the clones. Echo being the one that's really like, I can't believe we're actually doing this. I can't believe we're helping these people. But the other guys don't seem to be quite as bothered by that. And I thought that that was actually kind of cool too, is that you didn't have this one-dimensional hatred or something. There were varying
Right.
degrees of how people felt about this, because a couple of the clones, I think more or less like maybe Hunter and Tech in particular, were looking at it more like, look, that was then,
It's a job.
this is now, this is a job, the politics are out of it, we're kind of beyond this, they're the Empire now, the Republic doesn't even exist, like, the Republic that we served and that we loved doesn't even exist anymore. It almost becomes like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And I think that that's the vibe that they're starting to get a little bit, and it's, so I thought that that was really
Yeah.
nice that they had a lot of subtlety between that.
Yeah, they basically have to unlearn everything that they've been taught so far, and they just kind of have to make their own rules as they always have, which I always enjoyed. So GSA,
Before we
kinda-
go on to that, let me sneak in a couple of these comments here because they're relevant to this, and I don't really want to get to the point like we usually do, where when we go back to the chats, it's sort of like it's something we talked about like 20 minutes ago or whatever. Ronaldo says, maybe I'm the only one who thought about this, but that droid was very fast and had very good reflexes. She could keep up with the Bad Batch as they were sneaking. And then Bowright Family in Comics basically says, agreed, Ronaldo. So he pretty much agrees with that point. I did notice that. I did notice that it was interesting because if you look at that droid type, you're not really used to that kind of droid, which more or less resembles a Death Star droid, in my opinion. You're not used to them being that agile, which I thought was...
Yeah, moving that quickly.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. And I'm wondering if that's another foreshadowing moment.
Well, it's also one of those things. So you kind of have to look at the things that it's designed to do. It's pretty much like his assistant droid. That's basically like his personal. So you got kind of have to figure that the thing needs to be able to move quickly sometimes to do things.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just going by the fact that the different model droids, the different series.
Oh, yeah,
It would almost be like if you had a protocol droid that all of a sudden was doing all these crazy ninja type moves, I mean, it would just be a little bit, and yes, you can make the argument, well, they might have programmed it to do it, but it's like, well, if you program them to do it, it seems to me like you would use a different type of droid for that. But I digress. I think that it is worth noting, and I'm just wondering if that's going to pop up like at some point in the future. But carry on.
Oh, yeah. So now they started to, of course, make the assessments, and they're, using the droid to, as almost like a scapegoat or whatever. They're kind of like using it as a little pawn in their scheme of trying to attract different clone troopers and things like that. And, they're making their way and taking them out.
Yeah, but going to that
things
point,
like
though,
that.
and this kind of goes in with what we've been seeing in the comments, one of the things that I think was really interesting about that is even that wasn't handled in a cliched manner. You know, the droid wasn't ultra clumsy or weird or anything like the usual thing that you see when they would use a droid as a decoy or anything. And the other thing that I thought was really cool about this, as you pointed out, how they just keep progressing through. They didn't get hung up in the typical cliched ways that usually happens during these, I'm going to infiltrate the enemy fortress or whatever.
Right.
They just kind of went to the next level. All right, they dispatched these guys, and they kept going to the next one, dispatched those guys, got to the senator. I mean, it was really, and that's something that I appreciated because I understand the concept of you want to put a little bit of drama, you want to put a little danger, a little bit of uncertainty. But one of my complaints when they do this, particularly when they would do this with the Jedi, when they would do this even in The Mandalorian in some cases, it's almost like you're fighting between, look, if these guys are as powerful and as good and as elite as you're saying they are, they should not be having these kinds of problems. That's why they're elite. You know what I'm saying? Right. It's like, if let them be the elite forces. And that was one of the things that I thought was really cool about what they did here was, yeah, they just kind of went and they didn't really run into too much opposition that they couldn't handle very easily.
Well, yeah, especially when you're going against the regs, you know, as they call them.
Exactly.
So, you know, it's like, oh, these guys, I mean, whatever, you know, so. And
you know what I'm saying, though? It's
because,
like a lot of times that's what would happen, though. They would have like some sort of weird, like, okay, look, it makes sense when they went up against Crosshair and his more elite guys. But, you know, like you said, I mean, you're going up against these normal clone troopers. They're supposed to be an elite ones.
Well, that's the difference. See, even Crosshair, because he even said it like, okay, you know, originally when they were trying to send him out, they were trying to send him out with like maybe, you know, about 4 or 5 guys. And it was like, dude, this is not going to cut it against my squad.
Yes,
you know, you got to send like a battalion.
Like,
yeah, you have to send, like, you have to overwhelm them with force because Wrecker alone would just smash these guys. I mean, like, that's nothing for him, you know? So it's like, you got to really overwhelm these guys with sheer volume to even make it, you know, a fight for them. So they're progressing, you know, into this whole fortress or whatnot. And they're taking these guys out. They're using GSA to, you know, distract them and whatnot. And of course, he kind of has some funny moments where he saves the vase of that the senator received. And it's, oh yeah, this is one of his favorite pieces and things like that. Be careful. So he kind of had like a 3PO moment right there. So I thought that was kind of funny. And of course, they just kind of like, droids. Like once again, they kind of keep making the whole. And I think the whole thing is against droids is because that's all they've been fighting. Like during the whole Clone Wars, they were fighting droids. You know, that's how we got to know these guys. Anyways, they've always been smashing droids around. So, and then because they were part of the separatist thing, that's just kind of what they always kind of correlate with them. But back, you know, at the stronghold of, you know, let's call it Bad Batch HQ.
Yeah, that weird little cantina that Sid has.
Yeah, a little back at the ranch. Sid is, you know, kind of trying to figure out what's going on with Omega, and she's like, you know, what's your problem? You bring it down the vibe over here. You know, of course, Omega's moping around because she's, you know, wants to be with the guy. She hasn't heard from him, and you know, she's kind of worried. And she said, "Man, I should be there." And of course, Sid makes a statement that kind of really hurt Omega's feelings and said, "They're like, well, if you weren't so helpless, you know,
yeah, that kind of shocked me because up until that point, Sid was somewhat nurturing, at least for her, you know." But when she came out with that, I was like, "Whoa, that was brutal and harsh." I mean, don't get me wrong, it wasn't unnecessary. It was true to a point.
Yeah,
but it just really surprised me because I wasn't really used to seeing that, and I thought that was kind of refreshing too, to be honest.
Well, it was cool because the thing about Sid is that she does give tough love.
Yes,
and you could definitely, she's like that tough love mother, you know. So the fact that she's like, okay, well, you know, in life things are gonna go your way. Do something about it. No sense of you moping around about it. Like, go fix it. Go change it. You know. And that's basically what she was trying to basically inspire Omega to do. Even when she was trying to show her how to use that bow the first time, like, no, the problem is, you're not strong, you're not confident, And so when she showed her, like, a woman can do this, I thought that was a nice touch, and that was like a couple episodes ago. But, once again, I think Sid kind of likes Omega and sees that, like, okay, the child has potential for something. It's just that, all right, she's just not going to allow you to kind of feel sorry for yourself. She's going to make sure that you're going to be prepared for the world that's actually around you. So that's one thing I really did like about it.
It reminded me of that whole kindergarten cop thing with, Schwarzenegger. Stop whining. I'm not. It was one of those things that it sounds a little bit a little bit harsh, but in reality, it is her basically showing the tough love. And what I like about Sid is, if she needs to be a little softer and gentler, she will. When she needs to be a little bit tougher, and she seems to be good with Omega that way. She seems to be good at assessing those needs, which I really think is great. And I thought, again, this was the episode. So for a couple episodes, you had her bonding with Hunter. The last few was her bonding with Wrecker. Now you're getting a couple where she's bonding with Sid. So I think that's a really cool progression as well.
Yeah, and even in that whole thing, like, she knew she kind of messed up when she said the whole helpless thing.
Yeah.
Because even those two guys looked at her like, come on, dude. Like, even though, like, that was kind of harsh, and, she started walking over to her like, all right, and that's when Omega's like, well, I'm not helpless. And, I'm just, and Omega's just like, all right, kind of firing back at her a little bit, kind of showing her spunk. It's like, well, how much do they pay you to watch me? And she's like, not enough. So I thought that was kind of cool.
It was. Let me get to some of these chats again, because they're starting to get a lot of control. Ronaldo says, remember the Mandalorian episode where Din Djarin goes with some bounty hunters on a mission? Yeah. And he says, remember one of those was a droid? It had the same design as the droid in this episode. Maybe this design is more agile than a regular protocol droid. Yes, that's true. And I do remember that. But keep in mind that I never really said, though, that this was I was using the protocol droid thing as an example. This is not a protocol droid. I'm actually, I'm trying to remember what series this droid is. Because...
GS8. No, I'm just joking.
I could just reach through this screen.
I know. You would just force...
It's all right.
I'm going to have that force choking ability right now.
It's good. Yeah, right? That would be cool. But no, this is basically the same model as whatever the Death Star droid is. There was a time that I knew it because they had those books, Essential Guide to whatever, and they had one for droids and something. They had like weapons and something, and then they had droids and something else. Ships and droids, something like that. And I remember that the Death Star droid was somewhat of a common thing. I mean, that's what basically they called it as an action figure. But yeah, it probably does. Now that I'm thinking of the whole Mandalorian episode too, there probably is some agility brought into it. And after all, if the Death Star has a droid like this, it is kind of, it's a little crazy looking, right? He goes on to say, did you miss Omega in this episode? And then it's not like she wasn't, but she was less in this than in others.
Yeah. No, I mean, I like the fact that she wasn't in it as much. I mean, I like the fact that the Bad Batch kind of did their own thing. But we got to see two separate stories, and I love that aspect of it.
Well, and that's basically what it comes down to, right? Is that, again, it would have been unrealistic if, like we said in the beginning of this episode, you basically have this woman or girl, really, who everybody in the galaxy seems to be after right now. You got the Empire after her, so consequently you have all these bounty hunters after her. It really wouldn't make a lot of sense for them to want to bring her on all these missions. It just wouldn't. It wouldn't be logical. And this is the thing that sometimes the creators of these shows will fall into these traps. And one of the storytelling traps they fall into is they want to keep the gang together. And that's cool, and it gives us all the warm and fuzzies, but the problem is that from a storytelling perspective, that doesn't always work. And in this case, it didn't. The other thing is that although I really like Omega's character a lot, there is a danger that they could overuse her, especially given her importance. You know, last episode we found out she was essentially Boba Fett's sister, right? Just another unaltered clone, which of course factors in a little bit later into this episode as well, and we'll get to that. Ronaldo also makes a comment, little cantina with only 2 customers, by the way. Yeah, it's those 2 Ithorians or whatever, the hammerhead-looking dudes that... that
He's like a little snail and like...
Yeah.
I don't know. He looks like a burnt match or something like that. But
well, and the thing is, it's funny about that is it's true. There's only a couple of times where you really see a bunch of people in the cantina. I mean, it's a very sparsely attended cantina. Let's put it that way. And then finally, Ronaldo says, "I think we saw a bit of the softer side of Sid," and I would agree. Occasionally, like when you brought up the bow and everything, that was a little bit of a softer side. This is definitely another instance where we do see a little bit of a softer side. And that's what I like too, is because usually what happens is a character like Sid ends up being one-dimensional in a lot of these types of stories. But it's really cool to see that there's a little bit more complexity to her character as well. All right.
definitely.
So let's keep this going. Now what's
All
going
right.
on?
So now we've gotten to the point where, you know, our Bad Batch have basically gotten to the point where they're just at the outside of the door where the senator is being held, and of course, you know, the senator is basically telling the Imperial officer, like, "Hey, you know, look, my allegiance is to the people. You know, I can't turn my back on them." And, you know, she's like, "Well, I thought we discussed this, and, you know, sorry you feel that way." And he's basically trying to, you know, be tough and strong and say, like, you know, your little ways aren't going to affect me. And then we see the once again, the almighty interrogation droid, you know, with little
that
needle.
little interrogation probe droid. I was almost standing up and down cheering that they brought that thing out, because I was actually
I always bring that thing out so ominously too.
They do. But I mean, I can understand why now, because I actually read, I don't know, it was like within the last couple of days, I read an article about how those things actually work. They're a lot freakier than what you think. What they do is they basically inject, like I always thought that was like a little truth serum type of thing that they're injecting, like a sodium pentothal kind of thing. It's not. It's this pain enhancing thing. And then they go through and they do all these torturous things and everything, but because this injection that they give you enhances all your pain, I mean, it's pretty frightening,
The pain
actually.
receptors.
Yeah.
So when it starts torturing you, it's like 10 times worse than what it.
100.
Yeah.
Apparently, this thing is, and I mean, it's pretty devastating what it does to you. It does all these unspeakable things. So, you know, you don't really think of it as that big of a deal, other than, especially in A New Hope, when the thing was used and it had that really ominous music and all that. So it was really cool to see a callback to that thing, I have to admit.
Yeah. Well, it also makes you kind of wonder, like, dang, what did it do to Leia?
I know. It's the first thing I thought of when I was reading that article. Because, you know, and then you see her again when Luke goes to rescue her. She's all just kind of like lounging.
Sleep. Yeah.
Just kind of, you know, posing a little bit on that on that slab. And apparently whatever it was they did wasn't that bad. But then again, who knows? Maybe that's not how Lucas wrote the thing, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's had their piece in the Star Wars pie, so. But I will say this,
True.
though. I'm really surprised, given what this senator did, that they even kept him alive. Now, granted, I understand, because I know that the comment section, the chat would probably blow up with this. I already get the fact, because I'm sure Jason would point this out. If they started killing everybody, you know, right now they're almost at the same point. I don't know if you ever saw the whole V series, V and V the Final Battle, but oh man, you gotta see that. But when these aliens came, right, and they were coming as friends, and really they were harvesting everybody for food, but they obviously didn't make that known. They wanted to basically keep up the appearance that they just needed some water, and in return they were going to give cures to all these diseases and technology and all this to people. But they ended up operating a lot like the Nazis, right? They started these youth groups and all this, and they became this fascist regime that essentially was imprisoning the earth. And one of the things that you see this in the Empire too is that they, for a while anyway, up until episode 4, they kept the Senate. They kept the government in place. They kept a lot of these pretty much republic type things going because they didn't really want to show their true colors yet. They still wanted to be perceived as the friends and the liberators of the galaxy.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
it's still
why.
one of those things. It's a slow descent. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely that slow descent into it. So that way you don't realize you're being taken over until it's too late, until it's actually done.
Sure. It's kind of like that whole thing where they, they talk about putting the frog in water and then you
Frog in
slowly
water.
turn up the heat and then
Yep.
it just sits there because it's like, all right, whatever. And then
Yeah.
pretty soon it's
Exactly.
boiled. And that's pretty much what's happening here.
Yep. So Bad Batch storms the room, liberates extracts the Senator Singh, and they're out. And of course now they've been their presence has been alerted to. So now they have to kind of find a way to get out of there. And so now they're, basically matriculating through this whole fortress, trying to get out. And of course they kind of find this little walker, that's kind of been walking around. So they're like, all right, well, we'll just commandeer one of these things. And of course GSA just like, now how the heck are you going to do that from out here? And so
Now, here's
of course
my
the
question,
Bad Batch
though.
do what they do best.
Which do you like better? Do you like those more turtleish walkers better, or do you like the standard AT-ATs better?
AT-ATs.
Yeah, they're cooler. I mean, I will say, though, probably, I guess it really depends because they are taller, too, so you can hit bigger targets. But I could see from a strategic point of view why the walkers that we saw in this episode would actually be better because they're a little lower to the ground. So they got like 6 legs or something. So strategically speaking, they'd be harder to knock out. On the other hand, they don't seem to be as armored as well as walkers, though.
Not that, but they seem a little bit more like, it seems like there's a lot more to move them in a weird way than AT-ATs.
Yeah, they're kind of like traditional tanks that way.
Yeah. But so they kind of take over this whole little walker thing, and they're trudging along. They're doing pretty well for themselves, and then of course, they come under fire, and now they have to kind of get out and do what the Bad Batch does best, and that's destroy stuff, which Wrecker is all but too happy to do.
Of course.
So, so that was cool. So, you get a nice little fight that kind of goes on. And then eventually we get to the point where they reach, Tech has to kind of reboot the walker because it was damaged, and they had to, kind of do it manually. He gets it back up and running. And then at this point, Senator Singh basically says, okay, well, turn down this area and turn down this little street or whatever. And that's like, well, that's a dead end. He's like, you just got to trust me. And so, of course, Echo is the one, once again, always having kind of the issue with him. Like, I don't know. And it's like, look,
well,
you just
can
got to,
understand that too. I mean, it's like, it makes sense. But again, this is one of the things that I really love about this is that it's realistic. And then it's not like, well, you just got to trust me. Okay, I'll trust you. It's not really like warm and fuzzy. It's almost like they don't really have a choice.
Yeah.
So he begrudgingly trusts him. And that's one of the things that I like, that it's not easy. It's not too neat and clean. It's a little bit more how it really would be.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So they kind of set up by this little wall or whatever. Singh tells her, like, look, blow a hole in this wall. It kind of leads to this whole subterranean thing, so they do it and they kind of get in and get out, and boom, now the guys are, out of danger, and they're making their way towards the ship. Now I thought as they got to the ship, I thought one of the bounty hunters, I honestly was going to show up or something like that.
I thought
I thought it was going to be
thing.
Fennec Shannon or Cad Bane were going to pop up, and I was like, oh man.
And again,
but
I'm kind of glad it happened this way, but at the same time, it did seem really easy and without any kind of conflict, really. They just walked in,
Yeah.
got him, and left.
But I think it's just as your point that you made earlier. We once again you need to reinforce the fact that like these are elite group of guys. They can, this is what they do. Show why they're elite. And it was cool to kind of, like I said, see them on this mission by themselves, where they don't have to worry about, okay, well, where's Omega? Which I thought that was
Right.
hilarious. I forgot to mention this earlier.
Oh yeah,
but
where they're and you and Omega
when
can
Hunter,
go.
yeah, and
Exactly.
And Tech is like, well, that's kind of impossible, seeing
Yeah,
that
she's
Omega's
not here.
here.
But that
And
was
he's like,
cool that
oh,
they do
yeah.
see her as part of the team, and they're so used to her presence. Again, it's one of those little things that I appreciate, because a lot of times you would do that. If you're used to somebody always being around like that, you would just absentmindedly say their name. And I think that it's cool because it's not too perfect. A lot of times they do make these kind of mistakes a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not always like, okay, at the very last minute, they're going to save the day kind of thing. There definitely is a lot of realistic reactions in the series that I totally appreciate, and that was one of them. And the fact that, yes, that they were able to just more or less get away. And the other thing I thought, too, by the way, besides the bounty hunter, stopping him or whatever, I thought that when the senator was going back and forth trying to decide whether or not he really should leave or not, that it was going to buy enough time for maybe somebody in the Empire to catch up with them and to start dealing with them.
Yeah. Now, while this is going on, all this whole extraction is going on, back at the cantina, Sid is actually in this game with these guys, with I guess they're kind of like the regulars at the bar, and they're playing this game. And of course, Sid is losing. And now, Omega's like, I would make that move if I were you. And, of course, Sid is, sarcastically, oh, look, the expert over here is trying to tell me how to play the game. And then, of course, she loses. And then Omega's like, see, told you. He's like, okay, well, if you're so smart, basically, well, what should be my next move then? Omega goes over there, hits a couple of buttons, and, she wins the game for Sid. And now Sid is kind of like, wait a minute. Now, how did you know how to do that? You're a kid, you haven't been out anywhere. Like Sid knows Omega's story, in the sense that Omega is basically from Camino and hasn't been out anywhere. So it's like, okay, those two things alone, where would you pick that up from?
Yeah, you're not playing the hollow chess, or it begins like a Jenga or something. I forgot what the actual proper name is, but hollow chess is the other one. Of course, we all seen Chewbacca play it on the Falcon 500,000 times, but it's true. Where would she get the experience to even do this stuff? And that's definitely what Sid is pretty much wondering. Like, all right, how's that going?
What's up?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then, she's like, oh, this is a strategy game. I'm good at strategy. And it seems kind of, innocent and nonchalant. But then Sid kind of puts that to the test. And so then when she realizes that, all right, maybe you can win me some money. And she's like, well, Omega wisely being around the Bad Batch. Well, what's my cut of it? So she tries, Sid once again tries to kind of lowball her and like, 30%. She's like, no, 60%. So it's like, all right. She's learning. Once again, you can see the growth in Omega just intellectually.
Which is so refreshing.
Yeah.
Because the growth that you're seeing in Omega is a very organic, natural kind of a thing. It's not forced. It's not played for laughs. It's not played as like the cute, rebellious teenager kind of thing. It's just a very natural, understated thing, which I really love. This is another example of that.
Yep. And so now we're at the point where, now Sid is kind of got Omega pretty much winning a bunch of cash for it. And now the canteen is jumping. Now everybody's like coming in trying to play the
like
kid.
That typical casino scene in movies, right?
Yep.
There's a couple people around the table, but then somebody starts cleaning house, and now all of a sudden there's this huge just swath of people like surrounding the table.
Yeah, it's like a giant audience. And by this point, after, Singh pretty much comes, to his, final conclusion of whether he should stay or go. he decided, and that's funny because Echo was the one who kind of convinced him, like, look, live to fight another day type thing. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, it kind of
And
reminded
then-
me, honestly, in The Mandalorian when Din started to slowly warm up toward droids.
Yep.
It was that same kind of deal to where Echo's realizing, well, maybe the Separatists aren't the evil, horrible, monstrous people that I thought they were.
Yeah, exactly. And so they go back to Bad Batch HQ, and now they're walking in, and they're kind of like, as they're coming in, they're wondering like, well, where is everybody? And then now they're hearing like this ruckus, coming from the cantina, and of course, Hunter's first thing he's thinking about is Omega, because he's like, well, that's where I left her. I
Not
hope
to
she's
mention the
okay.
fact- yeah, because here's the thing, and this is the only thing that was interesting, and I was wondering if this was actually going to be a thing, because the whole reason, and I think they even had a little bit of dialogue in the episode, but the whole reason why they left her there was to be low key, to sort of keep her, underneath the radar, so to speak. And now all of a sudden you got this big crowd, and she's the focus of the attention.
Yep.
It's kind of like, what are you doing? This is
Exactly.
exactly the opposite of what we
Opposite
talked
of
about
what-
before we left. You were not
Yep.
supposed to do this. It's like the opposite of this.
Right. And so
Of course, he
Omega's like
warms up.
cleaning house. Yeah, Omega cleans house, and after everything is kind of all said and done, of course Hunter has that conversation when you just basically said with Omega, like, thought we kind of talked about this. You're supposed to be low key. This is the opposite of that. And then of course Sid is like, lighten up, Bandana. Like, she just paid off your debt. And they're like, huh? And it's like, yeah, the kid just won all these games for you guys and paid off you guys' debt, and so you guys are squared with me. And so now it's kind of like, all right, now Hunter's kind of intrigued, because now he's like, okay, well, one, that was really cool of you, but two is like, okay, how are you this good at beating all these adults at this very adult game?
Well, and I think that this is what we're going to, there's two takeaways that I have from all this. Number one, the obvious thing, which they did actually state, was the fact that Omega wanted to be, all she wants to do is be a part of the team and be helpful. And what
Right.
was cool was, even though she had to sit out this mission,
She
she
was still
actually
helpful.
was more helpful than if she had gone, because while they were gone, she just quietly paid off the entire debt. Now they don't have to worry about that. Unless, of course, they keep eating more space popcorn and running up a bunch of tabs or whatever. But that's the first takeaway that I thought was really cool, was the fact that,
Absolutely.
once again, she is valuable to the team, and you're starting to see that. She's a little bit less like a tag-along character and a little bit more now like, okay, this is your gig. And that's pretty much the whole time. It's like, well, what's my talent? What's my power? What's my this? Now I think we know what it is. It's strategy.
Yep. And see, then now everything kind of comes to my mind. It's like, this is why the Empire and everybody wants Omega, because if you think about it, if she's this master strategist, almost like an Admiral Trench, or like his droid that he had with him, who was able to kind of plot out all these battle sequences, like, you got somebody like that that's young who can do all this stuff. Well, think about, you would never lose any battles. You would never lose anything, because now you have this great commander that can basically strategically place everything, where now you be, as an Empire, like, you really would be unstoppable, because with the sheer amount of force that you have, and with this clone's ability to strategize, I mean, now, and I can see why the Kaminoans want her back, because if we can make more like her, that would be awesome.
And I mean, it's not even for the Kaminoans. I don't necessarily think I think it really is what they said it was. She's an unaltered clone. I mean, what her little special power is, I don't think really matters much, because let's face it, she's going to be strategic anyway, because Jango was a master strategist. And she comes from that DNA. Now, granted, because she was kind of like a rejected clone or whatever, that little strategy thing probably is on turbo.
1,000.
Yeah. But I mean, from the Kaminoans' point of view, I think they're strictly looking at it like, look, we just need an unaltered clone. Or this other DNA's completely breaking down and contaminated. We need to go back to something that's
to the original source.
Basically, yeah, an original source. The Empire, on the other hand, yeah, that's probably what it is. And it's really interesting to me to see how she would compare with Thrawn.
Yes.
Because
and then
we all know.
Yeah, Thrawn is a strategist. So yeah, that's what I was thinking about as well. And then, but now you can see, like, okay, how she would be a great asset to the Bad Batch now, because now with her strategic ability, and the rest of their heightened, abilities, like they really would be like a truly almost unstoppable force,
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, at the end of the conclusion of this, Hunter makes a deal with, Omega, says, all right, let's play this game. He wants to see up close and personal because Hunter himself is a good strategist as well. So I think he wants to match his wits with her. And he's like, okay, if you can beat me, then okay, we won't leave you on anything, any other mission, because now we know how to utilize
it that way. I took it the way a lot of other reviewers did, that he knows she can beat him. So it's kind of like, okay, he has no intention of ever leaving her behind again. So he kind of put it in this little game, like, okay, if you could beat me, we'll never, knowing full well she's going to beat him. But
that's true. That could be a possibility as well.
We'll have to see. So some of the comments by Ronaldo, of course, he goes back and says, the scene where the interrogation droid appeared is identical to the first time we saw it in episode 4. Yeah, that was one of the things that I thought was just so cool. I almost cried because of it, actually. Because
when I heard that sound, that
I know,
I was like,
I know.
Oh man! Like you just know the sound. It's kind of like
exactly. And once again, it's just, you got to give it to the sound designers of Star Wars, because they have all these different things, and everything has its own identifiable sound that you could pick up on instantly. He goes on to say, the thing that always annoyed me is that those walkers are so freaking slow and easy to destroy. I don't necessarily know that they're easy to destroy.
Easy to destroy.
They're easy for other walkers to destroy. Because if you think about it, it was the other walkers that were doing it, and I guess
they had the armament to do it. I mean, you got to think about it.
Yeah,
like, those walkers are designed to penetrate things that are kind of like it, or something that's heavily armored. That's why you use them.
Right.
So of course, they're gonna work against the other, but I wouldn't necessarily say they're easy to destroy, because even like the whole thing with Luke and Empire, right? I mean, you got to tie the legs up, and then you got to kind of hit it at a certain spot to blow the thing up.
I think he's talking more the ones that we saw in the more turtley ones, not
the turtley.
The ones that are a little, the ones that we saw in the episode. But even that, yes, it's like, okay, if you're good enough that you can open the hatch and throw an ion grenade down there or whatever. But I still wouldn't say that they're easy to destroy. But if you do have a little bit of strategy, if you're using another walker of the same type, then it is surprising, though, that they don't. I guess it would be a mixed bag, because on one hand, if you did have somebody that was rogue that captured a walker, you would want to be able to destroy it. On the other hand, if somebody commandeered one and then was attacking you, you wouldn't want it to be destroyed. I mean, so there's all kinds of different little things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and in the grand scheme of it all, it's like, in theory, you should not be able to just do that. You see what I'm saying? Like, you have to be skilled, like truly, really skilled in order to do something like this. Because, I mean, first of all, you're dealing with a military. I mean, that's almost like commandeering a tank from our military. Like, you mean to tell me you're going to, like, take out, like, these military guys who got, like, rifle certifications and all this, like, and take these guys out and then hop on a tank, yank this guy out, and then commandeer. I mean, like,
yeah, you have to have training.
The likelihood of that happening is very slim to none.
Very slim. So, but you also have to look at, like, if you're going to put it in more earthly terms, it would be like if some super elite special forces guy did it. So I mean, that would that would make
exactly
sense.
That makes sense, right?
Okay, so now Ronaldo asks the question: do you think Omega's strategic talent really has something to do with the Force?
No.
Not at all. Not even close.
Nope.
Because once again, you have to remember that she's a rejected clone. And one of the attributes that we see because of the Bad Batch, things like that, is that one of the little side effects is that one of their talents or whatever kind of gets amplified. So the normal clones, the regs, basically have this all-around, they're really good with weapons, they're obedient, they're good with technology, they're good with strategy, kind of like Jango, because they all come from Jango. So they have this basic all-around liberal arts kind of thing going, right? But
liberal arts.
but what happens when you get a rejected clone, one of the things that I guess is like a kind of a happy side effect is that one of those attributes gets turbocharged, basically. So in the case of Tech, he's really good with technology. In the case of Crosshair, he's just like freakishly good at aiming, right?
Yeah, he's a marksman. Yep.
Total marksman. Wrecker's like freakishly strong. So you get the idea. So in Omega's case, her little quirk is that she's just like super, super good at strategy, which of course is something that we learn with this episode. So I don't think any of that has to do with the Force. And I would certainly hope that they wouldn't fall into that trap.
Right.
Because that would be so cheesy, and honestly, it would just take down the entire show for me. I mean, I could live with it, I guess, if they did something like that. I mean, it wouldn't, but it would just be so disappointing.
They really would have to really make it make sense.
Oh, yeah. Well, the other problem, too, is that, that would be the problem that I have with a lot of Star Wars stuff, is they always have to try to go back to that well, because they know that's what sells. Right? So it's kind of like, well, let's just make it a Force ability. Plus, it's also lazy storytelling. It's really easy to explain it with the Force. Not to mention the fact, I don't think they really have to, because they have enough going on. The Bad Batch seems somewhat free of the Force in a lot of the same ways that Rogue One or Solo were.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the Mandalorians started out that way, but they brought in the Force to a degree that it makes sense. And once you introduce Grogu into the whole thing, I mean, now you're going to have that component. But what I really liked about that, though, was the fact that they didn't overdo that. They didn't take the focus too deep into the Force territory and make it cheesy and whatever. So with that said, that's probably going to wrap up our show tonight. What's interesting is that the High Republic issue number 6 dropped now. So now we're going to have to do 5 and 6 at some point. So we might just have to pre-record these things, or we could always do issue number 5 this Friday, maybe. We'll just have to see how it goes. Like if some other crazy story comes up, like it has been. It seems like every week there's some new crazy Star Wars thing that comes out to where, we're texting each other and it's like, oh, check this out. And you're reading it going, oh, yep, got to talk about that Friday.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll just have to see where we're at. But, as always, you guys are free to contact us. Let me sneak in this final comment from Ronaldo here. He says, I also don't think it has anything to do with the Force at all. I just hope they don't make that decision. We don't need Force to always be involved. Yes, let's not force it.
Oh.
Yes.
And on that note.
And on that note, that's what I was going to say too. On that note, I think that was the Grandmaster dad joke of them all. So be sure to check us out, this Friday at 8 o'clock, where we're going to be talking about something. We don't know what it is yet, but, stay with us. Hit that notification bell so you guys know what's going on, when we're going to be going live next, what it's going to be about. Hit that like button, because that actually helps us to bring more stuff to you guys, and hit the subscribe button. And so with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.